Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the ReThink Podcast with the King Center. And we are here to talk about Be Love Day, celebrate Be Love Day. How do we build the community together, the beloved community? I'm so thankful that you all are here. We're going to have an incredible conversation about environmental justice and climate change today. But before we get started, I want my co-host to introduce yourself. So go ahead, tell the people who you are.
My name is Sarah Singha, and I'm at the King Center as the program manager for internships and fellowships. We all feel very deeply about environmental issues, and we're here today to have a great conversation and inspire others to discuss these issues more deeply. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great day. And I don't know about you, but I'm super excited for this conversation. I've been waiting on this for a couple of weeks now. Once we got it confirmed, I've been Googling, I've been researching, I've been on YouTube trying to learn more about our special guest that we have for everybody today. Today, we are going to have a great conversation about why environmental justice is so important. And we are going to have the one, the only Reverend Lennox Yearwood Jr. to have that discussion with us today. It is going to be incredible. Reverend Lennox Yearwood is the president and CEO of the Hip Hop Caucus, and he has been doing a lot of work around this issue and talking about how we together as a community can tackle the issue of environmental justice. How do we address climate change together as a community? And really, he's been inspiring and motivating and educating people really all around the nation, all around the world, and how we do better together. So it's going to be a great conversation. So Reverend Yearwood, we are so thankful for you to make some time for us today, and we can't wait for the conversation.
Well, thank you. Great to be here. Good to see you all.
Absolutely. How's everything going? How's everything your way?
You know, we fighting a good fight. It's a lot going on. I mean, and right now, as you know, we have wildfires to the north. We have some droughts to the south. But listen, we are doing all we can. I want to first just thank the King Center and my dear friend, Dr. Bernice King, for understanding how impactful and important this issue is for our communities. If we don't have clean air and don't have clean water, we can't do nothing else. So I just want to thank them for understanding how important this moment is in regards to us pushing forward to having real environmental justice right now at this time.
Right. Well, we also want to thank you for taking the time out on behalf of the King Center, Dr. Bernice King. The work that you're doing is incredible, and it's more important today perhaps than it's ever been because of the point in time that we are in as a society. We have to make urgent decisions, and to do that, we need to be trained and equipped by people like you who are in the field doing the work on a daily basis. And so we are extremely thankful. And for our audience, for everyone that's listening to this, please make sure you're plugged in with Reverend Yearwood. He has some amazing work that he is doing in this area, and again, helping to you to be the change agent and the influencer in this area that we all need you to be. So we're going to go ahead and jump in and get started. I can't wait. We got some great conversations we had. So environmental racism is a topic of conversation that has been increasingly emphasized in the last couple of decades in a larger conversation about climate change. Can you give the audience some insight on when this conversation began and the factors that have influenced this field of study and activism to address this particular area of injustice?
Well, the conversation of environmental justice and environmental racism goes back to the time when people of color have been on this land and they have been dealing with the land. And what that really means is environmental racism is when you take a certain group of people, Black, brown, indigenous, based upon color, and you put them in harm's way. So for instance, we now know that 68% of people of color live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant. That's by design. So when they're designing the coal-fired power plants, they're putting them up, they're putting them in communities that are predominantly Black, brown, and indigenous, knowing that these communities will be impacted by the chemicals and the toxins from those facilities, causing harmful impacts and health impacts for that community. That's environmental racism, meaning that the industry is putting these facilities in that community, causing harm. The bigger picture, though, is that that smog, that air, that plastic, whatever's being construed in that facility goes beyond that. So what happens there, it has an immediate impact on those communities, which we now call sacrifice zones, because they're literally looking at these communities and saying that, listen, we're going to put these facilities here. We're going to sacrifice this community for other communities. But the problem is that because of the emissions, because of the pollution that goes up, it stays in around our planet, heats the planet up, and it causes everyone to be impacted, then causing climate change. And then causing climate change, that then causes sea level rise, it causes coral reefs to be bleached, it causes droughts, it causes wildfires. So on one aspect, this is the thing, the love aspect is that what you do to the least of these will have an impact on everyone. So what was first intended to harm, which you thought was a sacrifice zone, those three, because they had no political power, has now impacted everyone. And that's where we now have climate change.
Wow. So with that, then, would you say a sacrifice zone? That sounds so odd. Like, what does it mean? Like, so are you saying that there are certain communities that whether the federal or state or even at the city level, that they're basically making decisions about particular people groups in particular locations and saying that we can put these harmful substances in this community because we don't necessarily care about the long-term effects for these people?
That's exactly it. I mean, they're looking at a community and in a horrific fashion, and they're saying that this community, these people do not matter. And that's what's really sad, is that then you know the impact. So from where I am from in Louisiana, our home state is called Cancer Alley, literally because you put so much industry in a community that it causes folks to have cancer. And literally, they're having breast cancer and they have colon cancer and all kinds of diseases because of the industry you've put there. And people will say that's the cost of doing business. But the cost of doing business means that you are sacrificing certain communities, and then those communities are normally poor white communities or black communities or brown communities or indigenous communities. That being why it's called sacrifice zones. And environmental justice, what that term means for us is that means that the government, either the state or the federal government, is ensuring that the laws that are being put forth to stop us from having the harms of this industry, that they're being put in place to protect those communities. And there's sometimes a little bit of a thing with all that doesn't happen. So right now we're in the midst of a situation where those communities have been polluted and harmed, but the bigger impact now that is harming all of us. That's the thing about it. There's no one who is escaping the climate crisis right now. And that's the one thing. If you're in Vermont and you're watching this, or you're in the hills of California, or you're in Atlanta or Detroit, no one is escaping. So the bottom line to all of this is that we have to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. That's the solution. That's it. It's as easy as that. We got it, and we can get there. The great thing is that the science is telling us, which is fantastic, we still have time. And so we don't got much time, but we still got a little time. So we as humans, black, white, brown, red, male, female, humans, if we can transition from fossil fuels to clean energy, we have time to literally save the only planet we know, planet Earth.
Wow.
Reverend, have you noticed any type of sacrificial zones and sacrificial communities overseas as well in a global context?
Yes. So one of the things here is that a lot of times when we're in the street, it is based, unfortunately, on bottom line, on their business plan. And when they have these business plans, a lot of times for communities here in America or overseas, that business plan means a death sentence for those communities. So we now know in communities from in Asia, on the continent, in South America, wherever they may be, that they are also creating sacrifice zones. The one thing about America is that sometimes we have a lot of regulations that actually can bring things to light. But those same things that are holding corporations accountable here in America then are pushing them overseas to then do that. And what we don't want to do is have those communities, particularly there in South Africa, or they're in Ghana, if they're in Korea, if they're in Trinidad and Tobago, wherever they may be, we do not want them to be having the harm. So again, the ultimate goal here is that we need to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. And we have those solutions. We have renewables, we have solar technology, wind technology. We have so much technology now that allows us to transition from one to the next.
Wow. So it's interesting when you're talking about this. So when I think of clean energy, right, when I think even of vehicles and gas and all that, I mean, I think many of us would love an opportunity to be able to purchase more options of, say, we want to move off from fossil fuels, but it seems like it's almost like out of a price range, like meaning that it's so expensive to make that transition. Do you see in the next couple of years that as time goes on, some of these, again, whether it be cars that are powered by electricity or hydrogen or whatever, even solar powered, do you see technology becoming more affordable? That way people that are not a part of the more affluent communities can participate in this global movement towards clean energy.
Well, that's the exciting part, actually. You know, I'm folks probably may or may not know, I do a lot of demonstration. I'm in those streets fighting the good fight. But the one that's important that we know is that demonstration without legislation leads to frustration. And so what's really exciting now that we have legislation that's coming on board on both the state level and the federal level. And that's actually helping technology to move quickly and to be created, but also bring the price down. So we have this legislation on level called the bipartisan infrastructure law. That's the legislation that helps us to create infrastructure that can help us to transition, hence creating those EV charging stations, which are so important so we don't have EV driving anxiety, you don't have to worry about cars being shut off. That's important. We have the Inflation Reduction Act, which is literally helping us to transition, creating green banks and green loans and making sure that we can clean up during sacrifice zones and making sure we can help create the technology, which is bringing the price down. And so we have a lot of things that we are putting forth out there. It's actually a very exciting time for us. Again, the one thing about it is that if there wasn't a time clock, we would be cruising to make the change. We could make sure that we could be there. The problem is that, and the bad news and the real news for all those who are listening and watching, there is a time clock. And unfortunately, science and physics doesn't change. And so that is the thing there, that unless we make this transition, take this policy, do the things that need to be done to bring down the price of the technology, unless that happens, then it's going to be catastrophic. And that's the other part of the conversation. And we're seeing that. There's wildfires now in California. There's wildfires now in Canada that are literally having an impact from folks in Atlanta and DC and New Jersey. They're literally breathing in the smoke. The farmers have droughts, and we have folks who are dealing with that. One of the hard things here is that in other countries, as you mentioned, overseas, one of the things we're not getting reports of is that it is so hot in India and Pakistan. We are now getting reports that children are literally drowning themselves, trying to be underwater in buckets to avoid the heat. Children are drowning themselves. So it is getting bad. We are in a climate crisis. And so we really have to get serious, which leads to the other thing, litigation. And so right now, unfortunately, a lot of companies do not want to transition. And so a lot of good lawyers now making them and force them in courts to do the right thing.
Wow.
I think yesterday was the hottest day recorded in history. It was an article about it, that it was the hottest day ever all over the world, and the impact of people, especially young children, dying of dehydration and things like that because they don't have access to water. And the problem in other countries is they don't have access to clean water. So actually drinking more water in a climate situation like this opens them up to a range of diseases and things which they don't have to deal with in the colder months.
That's exactly it. Exactly it.
A huge problem. We also wanted to kind of ask your opinion on, why do you think that it has taken racism to become a active part of the conversation on climate change, in the sense that we've somehow talked about racism and we've talked about climate change, but we haven't talked about racism in the conversation of climate change? And why do you think that it's taken so long for us to have those conversations? And how can we discuss racism more concretely in terms of how it actually impacts climate change?
Yeah, I think unfortunately there are folks who don't want to just deal with the fact that we have racist policies and racist situations, and they don't want to deal with it in a way in which we can get to solutions. You know, one of the great things about young people, as you know, is that young people are right now being solutionary, and they're literally looking for solutions. And so, in this aspect, you know, we know for a fact we can look at our zip code and we can tell you how clean your areas are, how dirty your water is literally by your zip code, which again, because the sacrifice zones, what people are doing, they're literally putting these facilities in those communities. So race is an indicator to how clean your air is and how dirty your water is because of the facilities that are put in those communities. People say, what do you mean? The air is dirty, the water racist? No, that's not what we're saying. That the folks who are creating the policies or putting the industry is looking at communities through the lens and saying that these communities, which are predominantly Black, we're going to put our facilities there for a myriad of reasons. And that creates the racist policy that creates the situation with racial injustice. And so what we can do to that is just literally look at it through that lens. And so the federal government is now looking at climate justice through the lens of obviously economic factors and other factors. And one of those we feel, as many folks feel, needs to be done through race as a determining factor in that aspect.
Wow. Again, we are being blessed with the conversation from Reverend Lennox Yearwood Jr. This has been an amazing conversation so far. Demonstration without legislation leads to frustration. Such a potent point. I love hearing that. And so for you and the work that you've done, with all the work that you have done, what are some of the leaders and who are some of the organizations you know of that are helping to champion the work of ensuring that environmental justice becomes a more significant part of the conversation of climate change?
Well, there's so many. There's Uprose and WEAC and the Deep South Center, the Bullitt Center, named after the famous, we call him the godfather of environmental justice, Dr. Bob Bullard, the Bullitt Center out of Texas Southern. There's so many. There's obviously Hip Hop Caucus does amazing work. I think these are some great groups. Green 2.0, which looking at the issues of how we can deal with race and climate. There's so many groups that are now doing that. And then the old guard, I guess these are, we say, your large environmental organizations from the League of Conservation Voters and Sierra Club. I would say this though, what is happening now in this moment in crisis, that everyone is an environmentalist. That's the thing that I am seeing. It makes me the most excited that while we have institutions, which we need them, we now have folks who understand the crisis we are in. And they're becoming intersectional environmentalists. And what that means is that they understand the impacts of the health crisis, the impact of the housing crisis, the impact of the educational crisis, and how all that also impacts the environmental process. And so they're becoming intersectional environmentalists, where they're layering all these things together. And they're trying to make sure that we can have a good intersectional environments. Because on the other hand, we do have some bad intersectional environments who understand on the other side what it means to lay over poverty and what it means to lay over racism and what it means to lay over injustice in that fashion. So I do think that what we're seeing now is that we're seeing more people becoming aware of what it means to be an intersectional environmentalist at this time.
Wow.
I think intersectional environmentalism is a really important point because there is so much overlap between all of these discussions. And I think one of the things we wanted to talk about and ask you is the increase in environmental dumping, which is taking place. And of course, environmental dumping, not just of plastics and clothes, refuse, oils, crude oils, things like that. But it's really something that's a problem overseas in the global context. We're not seeing so much environmental dumping in the United States, but of course we're seeing it all over Central Africa, seeing it all over Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, countries that are already incredibly poor, already economically disadvantaged. And countries where the governments do not have strong regulations at all in terms of environmental protection, and because they lack education, and there's not a lot of money that is put aside by these governments to actually train people in environmental protection law. And so what do you think of, number one, how do you think that the kind of environmental dumping environment in a global context is impacting the United States? How is it impacting our trade? How is it impacting things like that? But also, how can we mitigate the effect that environmental dumping has on impoverished communities? Because in the United States, we don't really have impoverished communities at the same level that we do in places like Central Africa or East Asia or South Asia.
So I think that goes into the situation there in regards to the standards and regulations. And you're asking a very important piece. So let me actually take a step back for those that right now, from a global standpoint, we are having global conversations to deal with this, and we're dealing with what we call loss and damage is one aspect, meaning that the harm that our country is causing in regards to our pollution, it isn't leveled right. So the pollution that we are emitting in America is not the same pollution that other countries are emitting, particularly small island countries. And so they are bearing the brunt. And so we're creating a loss and damage process in which we can pay for and help them to get this. That also goes into a lot of the things from plastics and other things. Now, let me say this in regards to plastic. This is very important, people who are listening. We have a plastic crisis going on in regards to our climate crisis. And what I mean by that right now, because of the plastic fibers that are floating all around the air, we as human beings are consuming a credit card size worth of plastic each week into our bodies. We are now beginning to see plastic in the placenta in babies and our mothers. We have that much, and that is growing globally. And so in other countries, in India and Pakistan, throughout the continent, we are seeing how this is happening. And so one of the things to stop that, we need to have solutions that we must stop petrochemicals at the source. And there's a want to expand petrochemicals in this country, which hurts the global process. And if we want to stop it, right now there's a want to build over 120 new petrochemical facilities. If we can stop that, it would actually have a huge impact on what is being done and the impact around the globe. But that also goes to what's happening right now, the treaties. There's a plastic treaty going on that we're now negotiating, hopefully in Kenya, coming up. There's a global climate conference coming up that's going to be happening in Dubai this year. It's COP28, and we're excited for that. And then it'll be the COP is the conference of the parties, the climate conference, when we all come together around this globe from all of our beautiful countries and we sit down and negotiate. That'll be happening in Dubai this year. All that's happening. But again, the problem still comes to this, that unfortunately, a lot of folks do not want to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. And until that happens, my dear friend, my dear sister, we are going to continue to have the catastrophe of what we're seeing around the globe, in which they are literally dealing with the impacts as smaller countries with our pollution and our waste.
Well, Reverend Yearwood, that's an amazing point to be made. But I feel like as a listener, even thinking about how some of our audience might be hearing that. So we're saying that we're in a moment of crisis. And I know people have seen this because social media is obviously an extremely powerful tool in why this is so important. I mean, you have scientists, you have people that are in the field of study that have been protesting themselves because they are trying to let the world know that this is a urgent issue. This is not something you can kick down the road. But Reverend Yearwood, help me understand personally that if this is such a huge issue, if this is so important, if the most urgency that we need to have for something that's affecting every single human being on earth, the future is at risk for every human being, why is it that we are so slow to turn the ship towards doing the right thing in this issue? Why are we dragging our feet through the sand on the issue of climate change and environmental justice?
Man, that seemed like it's like a lot you said there, but it's like I have a hard. It wouldn't be. It should be a hard answer, but it's not a hard answer. It's boiled down to one word that starts with a capital G, and that's greed. And unfortunately, that greed is literally taking us down as a world and as a beloved community. That is it. That these industries have done everything to keep their bottom line and to keep putting forth this measure in a way that it harms us. I want to say this because, yes, and this is not new for us. We as a people, when we come together, have been able to overcome many things. Obviously, here in America, we've been able to overcome segregation in a way and racism in that aspect from equality. While there's still work to be done, we've still overcome so much in many aspects from the job issue, from women's rights. And even though there's been some rollbacks, we still overcome so much. But this one you're talking about is this. It isn't just about equality, it's about existence. The difference there, if we don't get this one right, there is no second chance. There is no other water fountain to drink from. There is no other community to build. This is the one that takes us all out. So you're right. So right now, there's a thing where the industry is saying that listen, we know the problem too. They're very aware of the climate crisis, but what they are saying that, but let us just burn all the oil, let us burn all the gas, let us burn all the coal, let's just get it done, and then when it's done, we'll transition. We know from a science standpoint that we can't wait for you to burn it all before we transition. So to your point, that means that we have the data, we have the research, but now we need one thing that we think we need is storytelling, and we need better storytelling to make sure people understand really what we're in. And that's what I think that we're working on now is to have better storytelling, better information, clear information. This helps so much. People listen to this, they can be like, don't be afraid of the moment. Let's come together as humans. We can do it together. But this is this moment that we're in. And I think that, and I believe in people. This is from the standpoint of the King Center. I believe that when we come together, we can do great things. And I also believe that organized people beats organized money every single time. So I just need us as people to be organized so we can really help us. Because the one thing I'll tell you is this: it's getting bad now, as we just heard. There are children right now who are hurting across this globe, and they are either they don't have water because of the drought, or they're drinking bad water. They're getting malaria. They're getting other diseases. It's bad. I mean, it is really bad. But this is the one thing I would say: if you think it's bad now in 2023, imagine what it's going to be like in 21, 23. So the thing that I was saying now, let us not be the generation that the others look back and they curse us for not doing anything. Let us be the generation that comes together to fix this crisis, to transition from fossil fuel to clean energy, to stand up to those who want to keep us in the old way and locked in to our addiction to fossil fuels. Let us be the generation that finally says no to fossil fuels and yes to renewables and yes to a clean air and clean water and yes to a world where our children can breathe, can play, and they can have a life that is not one that is impacted by the climate crisis.
Thank you so much. And especially the issue that you've raised about clean water is a very, very significant one, because I think that when we live in the United States, we take so many things for granted because of our inherent inbuilt privilege that comes from living in a developed nation. So it's not often that we think about not having access to clean water or not having access to multiple types of bottled water or vitamin infused water and things like that. We have a lot of choice when it comes to water. But of course, in other countries, there are very few clean sources of water. And for many people still living in villages, they have to drink out of wells. And there's many, many waterborne diseases, as you mentioned. I mean, malaria, but also things like dengue fever, waterborne sites that once you drink, I mean, there are children.
Yes.
They can literally die of dengue fever has been growing, actually expanding for a number of years. And little children who are either dying of waterborne parasites or from just dehydration because they don't have access to clean water. And yet we have ways to clean water very simply,
right.
very efficiently, and very cost effectively, but those things are not being distributed like the water cleaning tablets that are available. So
And we can do it. And that's the
yes,
thing about it. Well, so
yes,
we need to create that political will. And that's the thing I think that people need to understand, to your question earlier. Why are we doing this? Because we have to create the political will to create these changes to move things forward.
right. And as you said, it is about greed because, of course, if we widely distribute water cleaning tablets and things, it's not a good business. There's not a lot of money because it's the right thing to do. So leading from there, I think another question that we wanted to talk about is food disparity. Food disparity and food inequality, and the kind of relationship that is being nurtured right now between consumers and farmers all over the world, in the sense that the relationship between food and who has access to food and the farmers who are involved in food production is very much based on this concept of greed, as you're saying. And it's creating an environment where not everyone has access to clean food. Not everyone has access to good food. And we're seeing so much genetic modification in manufacturing that is increasing in the food industry. And we're also seeing a tremendous amount of food wastage that could be redistributed and sent to developing nations or other places that need it. And I think that needs to be part of the environmental conversation. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, I want to thank you. A lot of folks say food desert and not food scarcity, and deserts are natural. That's why I always say that. So when people say that, that's one of the things that we are looking to say, no, we need our natural things like that. But food scarcity is something that we don't need to have. That means what we're saying here in many cases, that but how we're treating our food, what we're doing to it, is having an impact on our communities. So folks who don't know, there are many levels to this. First, on the micro level, which we're talking about is this. That means that how far it takes you to walk to get good food. So if you're living in a community, food scarcity, you're living in a community, that means that you don't have vegetables or fruits, or you can't get to a grocery store that provides that within a walking distance. And so then you're regulated, in many cases, the food scarcity situation where in your community, you're relying on canned goods or things that are outdated within that aspect. You're getting processed foods, which causes a lot of health impacts from diabetes and other health concerns. The other aspect of this is what we're saying here is that then from an agricultural standpoint, we're also modifying food and doing things to food is also then causing harm. Because again, this is kind of back to the greed component. We're doing things that they rush nature, that actually is hurting the environment in a way that is not good. And so I do think that right now there is policies, and there are countries. I will say that our country is not at the top of the list. I mean, America, how we're handling this. There are countries that are literally looking at how they are in France, for instance, and other countries, how they are recycling food, how they are reusing food, how they're not, and how obviously this goes to composting, other ways of keeping food and then redirecting food, as we're saying. There are countries who are doing this in an amazing fashion. And so we should look at that more. And also just in general, this goes back to our plastics conversation earlier on how we're even packaging our food. I mean, no offense. I mean, I still know how to cut up cantaloupe. I don't need you to put each slice of cantaloupe in a plastic container. Or my watermelon. I still got it, y'all. I can still cut it up. I don't need you to take the banana out the banana and cut the banana. It comes in a beautiful banana peel. I don't need you to take it out of that and put it in plastic. So I do think even through the packaging, all this impacts our climate, has an impact, because folks don't know plastic is oil and gas. And so that is part of the thing that create that. But part of the agricultural piece, I do think this. One of the things here, as we're also seeing, is that we are now having wars and climate wars based upon food scarcity. Which we saw that in Syria, we're seeing that in other parts of the globe. We're seeing that now where there's, because of either the droughts and other things that are causing the farms, but also just how people are manufacturing certain things. We're seeing that is now causing a lot of instability. And so that is now creating literally wars. So now we're having wars over food, wars over water, and wars because of climate. That is where we're now going. So this is all these things, again, are connected in an intersectional fashion.
Wow. Well, Reverend Yearwood, this has been an incredible conversation. And I think that speak for myself, I have learned a lot. I think our audience has learned a lot from this conversation. And we have one more question before we wrap up our time. How do you believe we can empower the next generation, which is millennials, Generation Z, and then those to come after them? How can we empower the next generation to take a lead in combating environmental racism by utilizing nonviolence, organizing, and strategic action? How would you encourage young people to do that?
Well, I think young people are actually ready to do it. That's the one thing about it. I would say this. I think that we have to be true to our word. And I think we have to be serious about the crisis that we're in. We talk about a lot of different things, from food scarcity to wildfires to droughts and to many things that are hurting us. This happened. We're seeing it right now. We're having the hottest years to the hottest days. It's happening. We are in a climate crisis. This is what I would say, though. We have to be real. You know, I started off this conversation by saying how much I absolutely do love the King Center, how much I love my dear sister, Dr. Bernice King. But one of the things that I love the great city of Atlanta is, Atlanta is known as the city in the forest, and we know that. And I know right now there are many folks who are young people who are watching this, and they are saying that, okay, keep it a buck. Do not tear down the Wellany Forest. Keep that place intact. And so one of the things there in this aspect that we have to do is that we have to show that we are really serious about our priorities. And I think that for young people, they want to see true climate heroes. They don't want you to talk about renewables on Monday and then cutting down a forest on Thursday. They don't want you to talk about, solar technology on Tuesday, but also building pipelines on Friday. That isn't what it means for climate leadership. So what young people want is consistency. They are saying, if we know there's a climate crisis, it's here. We all see it. But let us be serious about what it takes to have the sacrifices to move us from fossil fuels to clean energy. That's what they want to see. Let's do that. It's possible. I get it. I know it's tough to roll back. I know transition is hard, but we can do it. We have no choice but to do it. And let me just say, I don't want to close. Let me just say as we close. I mentioned 100 years from now about what the world looks like from many aspects in 2123. I'll say this, 2123, many of us who are watching this thing right now, we're watching on our screens, many of us won't be here. We won't physically be here. But in 2123, the decisions we are making right now in regards to our climate will still be here. And if they, 100 years from now, are somehow find this video and they see us in these little boxes, they're gonna wonder why are we in these little boxes, first of all. But they see these boxes, they're gonna say, why didn't we transition? Why are we dying now? Why is there no more Miami? Why is there no more Long Island? Why is India and Pakistan on fire? Why did we lose the Fiji Islands? What happened? Why did we make a courageous statement?
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, we make a statement now by saying no to fossil fuels and yes to clean energy.
Wow, I love that. I love the vision of seeing 2123. They're taking a magic school bus trip to Jupiter, watching this video, talking about the things we did right, that this was the turning point, that today was the day that we all decided to make a new decision. Reverend Yearwood, this has been incredible. You are doing such a service to humanity. We absolutely applaud the work that you are doing. The King Center is glad and celebrates you and your organization. Thank you so much. Again, Reverend Lennox Yearwood Jr., President and CEO of the Hip Hop Caucus. This is the ReThink Podcast with the King Center. How can you be loved in the world around you today and every day going forward, y'all? This has been an incredible episode. Hey, y'all, we see y'all on the other side. See y'all soon.
Thank you.